All right. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Monday, May 11th, 2020. It is 6:03 p.m. This is the Town of Halifax Finance Committee meeting. We're being recorded via Zoom. On tonight's agenda, budgets, wage and personnel recommendations, reserve fund transfers, line item transfers, acceptance of minutes, correspondence, public participation, calendar, and as may arise. If no one minds, I'd like to move a little out of turn just to get some of the housekeeping issues taken care of, because that feels more onerous when it's late and we're tired. So I'm going to ask that we move up the line item transfers, which is item 3 on the agenda. We have 2, I believe, sitting in our email inboxes. One we voted on last week and we signed electronically over the past week. But then we should have one from Charlie dated May 5th, and one in our inbox from Linda Cole dated also May 5th. Linda or Charlie, do you know if we received any subsequent ones?
We have not.
Did you, Linda?
Yes, there was nothing in it.
Thank you, folks. Okay, the first one, I'm going to start with the one that was in Charlie's email. This is a request for the following transfer. Please transfer the amount of $13,146.98 from account name Group Insurance. The budget amount for this fiscal year was $1,068,828. The current balance is $116,208.34. The reason for the excess balance in the account is less participation than expected. Transfer to account Board of Health Inspectors. The budget amount for this fiscal year was $73,715. The current balance in the account is $14,044.33. The reason for the unprotected deficit in this account is unexpected retirement. So this is the to pay out for the accrued vacation hours for the health inspector. I will entertain a motion to approve the line item transfer in the amount of $13,146.98.
So moved.
Seconded.
Recommend.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, thank you. Okay. And on the next one, sorry, I'm just reading the text. Okay. Request is made for the following transfer. The amount of $89.26 from account name Fire PT Wages. The budgeted amount for this fiscal year was $200,738. The current balance in the account is $88,319.39. The reason for the excess balance in the account is not as many storms this year. Therefore, the call department was not utilized as much this winter as in previous years. Transfer to account Fire Department Clerical Wages. The budget amount for this fiscal year was $37,628. The current balance in this account is $6,732.50. The reason for the projected deficit in this account is payment was for hours required to work for holidays and Halifax station coverage. These hours were in addition to the original budgeted hours of 32 hours per week. So I would entertain a motion to recommend the line item transfer in the amount of $89.26.
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a, sorry, and I have the chat open. Okay, second was from Cheryl. Great. Any questions? I know Chief Viveros is here.
I'll just give a little comment, Melinda. Generally, we brought in I generally up our staffing that night just because of the amount of people in town. I want to have some people over at the school to check for overcrowding, things like that. Mm-hmm. I didn't have enough call firefighters. And if we go out 2 years in a row, we're out on calls during the event. So I wanted to have one person that I could guarantee was going to be in the station. And I asked Kenra to come in. Generally, from here forward, I spoke to Charlie about it. We're going to try to look for volunteers or have someone there. But it was just to make sure we actually had someone in the station in the event. We all had to leave and go out on calls.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. So what we can do is I will get those printed out tonight, if you don't mind. Like, just because it takes me a while to print, I'll call dibs on doing it first. Get them printed. I'll PDF them this time for sure, and get those out to the group for the other signatures. Okay. Thank you, folks. Okay, next up, acceptance of minutes. Okay, thank you very much, Linda, for doing the meeting minutes for us. They are in your inbox dated May 7th. So these are the meeting minutes from Monday, May 4th, 2020. Members in attendance were Melinda Tarsi, Bill McAvoy, Cheryl Zarella Burke, and Drew McClinty. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from Monday, May 4th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Cheryl. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thank you, folks. Thank you again, Linda, for doing that.
Sure, you have to also approve the ones from 427 because you didn't get to them last week when we kind of cut it short.
Oh, right. Thank you so much. Okay.
You're welcome.
All right. So let me
Suppose I
find.
can vote for.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from Monday, April 27th, 2020.
We'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, folks. Okay. Do we have any correspondence?
I know you got the emails from Charlie about what he sent to the school and the warrant. And did everybody get the correspondence on the estimates from the Board of Health?
Concerning the landfill?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so did,
So-
sorry, Linda, go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. I think that's all we had. And then Charlie had the quick email about the warrant process and just asking, I think if everybody still wanted to approve the article or recommend for the article to raise and appropriate the sum of $65,000 for the zoning bylaws. And so everything we had came in through email.
Okay, perfect. And if it's okay with everyone, we'll because since they're all budget related, we can just handle all of those under the budget discussion. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so let's go to, again, sorry to move out of order, but I'm just trying to kind of maximize the time that we can spend on one thing. If everyone doesn't mind, can we move to the wage and personnel recommendations, since that will be a little more brief than a larger budget discussion. So FinCom members, you'll find in your email the copy, and I'm pretty sure we all had the paper version of this. These were the proposals made to the Wage and Personnel Board, like I said, way back when. This is the electronic copy. Wage and Personnel has made recommendations on some of the items, but not all. So I'm going to present to you tonight the ones that they have made, and I'm doing this as the FinCom's representative to the Wage and Personnel Board. So I can tell you what our votes were, but ultimately I'll then vote with you as well as the Finance Committee. Okay, so I have, all right, so what's helpful about this document, if you're all able to put it up in front of you, mine is loading, is that it's broken out by sort of categories, and that's going to help because certain categories of things we were able to make motion on, or make movement on rather, and other ones we weren't. Okay, so if you look on the first page, there were requests for regrading and reclassifications from several department heads. And they were, most of them are asking for reclassifications from grade 6 to grade 7, or from 7 to 8, or from 6 to 8. The Wage and Personnel Board has voted so far to table those requests. So that is one that we haven't, we won't be making recommendations on any of those reclassifications, like I said, from 6 to 8, 7 to 8, or 6 to 8, okay? If you go down a little bit, what's numbered item number 13, 14 and 15, those are potential new positions and reviews of job descriptions. The Wage and Personnel Board has not issued recommendations on those. Hopefully we'll get that done this Thursday. That will be something that we'd have to present recommendations on the floor for as well. Under benefit changes, so item 16, This is the proposal that full-time employees who hold a degree of higher education shall qualify for an incentive pay raise to be 1% of the employee's base salary. The Wage and Personnel Board did not recommend the 1% incentive. And just as a reminder, the board is myself and Gordon Andrews. So if it's a split vote, it's 1-1. If it's unanimous, it's 2-0. And this was, so far, all the votes I'm going to present to you tonight are unanimous. So again, the Wage and Personnel Board did not recommend number 16. Number 17, which is a new disciplinary policy proposal. Hopefully we will have that on Thursday to make recommendations on, but right now we don't have recommendations on that. Item 18, changing the minimum number of days for the posting of an open position from 5 business days to 10 business days. The Wage and Personnel Board voted to recommend. Number 18.
That's actually 10 calendar days, it says, not business days.
Yes, correct. Oh, sorry. From 5 business days to 10 calendar days.
That gets, I mean, right now, 5 business days is less than a week. In general, 10 days at least is a little bit more than a week. I mean, I can go with, 10 business days, 10 calendar days is a little more than a week. I was trying to make sure that at the very least, there was a full calendar week involved between when the job was posted and when the deadline was, which is a little bit more than what we've got right now.
Okay.
I will just, sorry, I will say that unless there's some extenuating circumstances, I think like 95% of the time I've managed to convince departments to have the job posted for at least 2 calendar weeks. I think it's been very rare since this went in that we've done some anything posted for fewer days than 2 calendar weeks.
Okay, on number 19, this is to update holiday pay section to reduce discrepancies in holiday pay. I will find the actual wording for you, but essentially the Wage and Personnel Board voted to recommend that only the second paragraph of the holiday pay bylaw applies for on-call and special police officers. So let me find that paragraph for you. Sorry, everything's in different places. All right, sorry about that, folks. I am forwarding it to you right now. All right, so you're gonna get a few files all at once. The PDF has the proposed amendments, and if you scroll through, and I'll find the page of it for you, where the wording is concerning the holiday pay. So in the PDF, it's page 20. And we can do our own recommendation votes on this. I just wanted to kind of, there's not a lot that have recommendations on them as of right now, so I figured I just go through all of them and then we'll go back and revisit for votes. Item number 20, update gender pronouns in the 5 parts of the Wage and Personnel Bylaw. That should be right around or right after page 20 in that PDF. Wage and Personnel voted to recommend. For number 21, study whether changes are needed in pay rates in connection with increases in the Massachusetts municipal wage schedule for the next few years. We have students performing a wage study for us, but right now they had a lot of trouble getting in touch with many towns because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of towns that aren't able to respond. So I do have their data collected. I will pass that along to Wage and Personnel, but as of right now, I don't have a recommendation on that. Finally, number 22, to disband the Wage and Personnel Board and to redistribute its duties to the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, and Treasurer Collector's Office. The Wage and Personnel Board voted to recommend. So we can start with number 16 for the Finance Committee's recommendations. Number 16 again is a full-time employee who holds a degree of higher education shall qualify for an incentive pay raise to be 1% of the employee's salary. Within your PDF that you have in front of you, that would be on page 13. Okay. And this was proposed by Jean Gallant, and I know Jean's on the call tonight as well. So this proposal is, again, to add to 35-20A, any full-time employee who holds a degree of higher education shall qualify for an incentive pay raise to be 1% of the employee's base salary. So that we can open up discussion, I'll entertain a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend what we will call number 16, or the addition of 35-20A, the 1% incentive pay raise.
Make a motion to recommend.
Second.
Moved and seconded, okay. Jean, if you'd like, you can talk to the, I know you talked already to the Wage and Personnel, and even though one of us is here, I don't want to misinterpret anything that you have to say in addition to your proposal. So if there's anything that you or anyone else wants to jump in on at this time, please do feel free.
I was just wondering what your thought process was and not actually recommending this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know we had talked about it a little bit. Was it, I'm trying to remember. I wasn't really prepared to talk about this tonight, but I think it was more if we were recommending whether it was a bachelor's or a master's degree, or what kind of discussion did you and Gordon have about this?
So the discussion that we had when we voted on this was like the week before last, was really similar to the one that we had when you were with us, Jean. And ultimately the kind of sticking point for us was that as written, we would incentivize education, which we all agree we like education, but as written, the education doesn't have to directly apply to the employee's position or their job. And it might cause an unnecessary salary kind of inflation if folks who do have higher education degrees, but that aren't in that particular, like in a field that's relevant to that particular job. And we didn't think that that was the best way to incentivize more skilled workers. So like the example we were talking about, like I have a terminal degree, but I wouldn't be very useful, or that degree is not useful for the water department, let's say, if I were in the water department. So that was sort of the sticking point, was that there wasn't really a way to word it or to kind of structure it such that we could put in wording about how that education has to be directly applicable to that position.
Right. I think, I actually have my notes on that. And I think my point and why I thought to ask for this was to kind of mainly create some separation within the grades. So I know we're always talking about this, and that's why I wanted to know what your thoughts were, but I'm trying to create some separation within the grades. So if somebody is a grade 6 and they have a bachelor's degree, because that bachelor's degree is required, to kind of give some type of incentive and acknowledge that, because we acknowledge experience within the grades. But we don't necessarily acknowledge education. And I think that's kind of how the town has operated over time, where, you know, a degree has not been not a priority, but has not really been acknowledged within the grades. We're more experienced. Like you can approach wage and personnel and you can say, oh, well, she has a lot of experience, or this person has a lot of experience, so I want to bring them in at a higher step. But there's nothing there that says, well, she has a bachelor's, or this person has a bachelor's, so I want to bring them in at a higher step. So I'm really trying to create some separation and acknowledge a higher degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and I don't think Gordon Songson thinks at the school committee, but our meeting's recorded, so if anyone who was there thinks I'm misrepresenting the conversation, please, like Charlie or Sandy, tag in. But I think that with the flexibility to start people off at higher steps, given past experience and or education, we thought that sort of not took care of the problem per se, but that was a way to address it that allowed for some discretion in reviewing the applicability of the education. Because I hear what you're saying, Jean, about wanting to pull in or wanting to make someone maybe with a different kind of degree look twice at a job ad that maybe they didn't originally or what have you. But as written, we felt uncomfortable with like I said, there being no way to say that a certain degree was more valuable than another, and that would be a really hard, we thought that would generate a lot of hard conversations.
Well, you're not really saying that that if I had wrote it a different way, that you may have looked at it differently, right? You find it's fundamental that you really just don't agree with the premise. Is that right? Because then next year I can go back and try to rephrase things. That's what you're making me think about that. You know
what I think's what I think complicates it too, Jean, and because you've been so helpful in the last actually 2 years of reviewing positions and things, is that I think there's more work to do still on resetting our bands or whatever you want to call them, our grades and what we're points fall and stuff. And I almost wonder if a lot of the things that we struggle with about like those margins would get worked out if and when we're able to redo that system. That's I can't speak for Gordon. That's how I feel having gone through that process last year, is that I think rather than add extra additions to the wage and personnel bylaws, I think that's a big project that needs to happen, but that would then take care of a lot of what a lot of us feel are, some sticking points around particular areas. That's my honest, response.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just don't want to go to sleep tonight thinking I didn't phrase this correctly.
No. And like I said, like you've been so helpful and like you were so involved in that process last year too. And I think like you probably more than most of us tonight, just again, how much you were in the room with us, know all the conversations we had about like where to split things and where numbers fell and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think if we're able to do a true, like reset those grades and figure out what scores go where, I think we'll feel a lot better about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Any comments or questions? Any questions from the Finance Committee? I'm right now acting as a representative from Wage and Personnel. Okay, hearing none. Any other comments from members of the public? I don't want to, it's hard on a conference call. I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay, so all those in favor of recommending what we'll call number 16, and that's the 1% incentive stipend. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstentions? Okay, so that was 3-1. I will make sure to note that too for any ones that aren't unanimous. We'll always make a note for town meeting in case the question arises. Okay. Number 17, we don't have as of yet. Number 18, this was the change to the minimum number of days for the open posting and on your PDFs. This is on page 21. So we can open up discussion. I'll entertain a motion to recommend what we will call number 18, changing the minimum number of posting days.
Make a motion to recommend.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, Charlie, I know you made a comment about this before. It just allows us more time to have postings up. That was Wage and Personnel's general sentiment, was the more time the better. But if there's anything that you want to add, please feel free.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do too many things at once. It's been that type of day. Which thing are we talking about right now?
The posting, the job posting.
Yes, yeah. I just in terms of being fair to applicants and to try and increase the pool for the town, I felt that 5 business days wasn't sufficient. Technically, someone could give me something on Sunday and it ended on Friday. And especially, we've had certain, legally, I can't prevent someone from doing something. So unless there's something in the bylaw. And this way, what I do is make sure that there's at least a certain number of days between the start and the end. And that way, we've given everybody a fair shake at being able to apply for a position.
Any other comments or questions from anyone?
Yeah, so when does the minimum of 10 calendar days start? There's a lot of requirements here. The notice distribution that the department has, notice on the town's website, posting at the town hall. I presume it would start after the completion of the last action.
Yeah, what I try and do is make sure, let me look at the star list myself. Just a minute, please. Let's see here. So after all those things are done, then the 10 days starts. So my recommendation to a department head or somebody would be, it's 10 days. Usually I can get the distribution in for the department heads on the website and town hall on the same day. But the local newspaper shows up once a week. It's usually Tuesday that I can advertise for Friday. So on a particular Friday, that means, if somebody gives me something on Monday or Tuesday, I'll get it on Friday. The count starts on Friday, and it will be 10 calendar days from that point. So basically a week and a half. So for instance, somebody gave me something today, it'd be in the paper on the 15th. So May 25th would be the deadline. But all those things would have to be done for the count to start.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Finance Committee recommends. All right, next up, number 19, updating the holiday pay section. Okay, so in your PDF, this is page 20. Page 20. So that we can open up conversation, I'll entertain a motion to, for the Finance Committee to recommend the change to the holiday pay structure, which on your list again is number 19.
Make a motion to recommend.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Charlie, do you want to?
It was just trying to eliminate some discrepancies in the language and make certain who we were going to be paying holiday pay to and who we were not going to be paying holiday pay. In essence, the question was, if someone's not required to work on a holiday, are we going to pay holiday pay or not? If we're requiring, forgetting about the union folks and forgetting about wage and personnel, if they're required to work a holiday, for instance, what can I think of? So let's say July 4th is a Saturday, the water department has to go out to check the wells on Saturdays and Sundays. So we're requiring somebody to go out and do that work on July 4th Saturday. They should get holiday pay because we're requiring them. If someone is not required to work, in essence, they've decided voluntarily to fill a shift or something like that, it's a different story. And I think we've covered just about everybody except the part-time employees who might work a holiday or not, but it's voluntarily. And so we wanted to be specific about whether or not we would pay holiday pay.
Okay, any further questions?
If an employee works on a holiday other than Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day, the employee is paid for the hours worked plus an equal number of hours of holiday pay. So if an employee works on a non-big three for say 8 hours, they're going to get 8 hours of straight pay plus 8 hours of holiday pay. So essentially it's double time.
Right. So, and that's how I
At least that's how I interpret the second paragraph.
Looking at the language too. Well, so right now, all regular full-time and part-time employees receive holiday pay prorated based on the normal hours an employee works for a given week. And so if the employee works on a holiday other than the 3 days, they're paid for the hours worked plus an equal number of holiday pay hours. Call firefighters and special police officers are paid a time and a half of regular rate for working a holiday, except for the big three. And then the big three, they're paid twice. So the possible amendments I listed were specify a second paragraph that is just for the employees not already eligible for holiday pay, which would be folks who are not regular employees and are not call firefighters or special police officers. So that they would be eligible for holiday pay. And so if if a non-regular part-time, because we don't have any non-regular full-time, but non-regular part-time employees work a holiday, they'll get paid for that holiday, that same number of hours they work. They work on Columbus Day for 3 hours, they'll get 3 hours of holiday pay for working Columbus Day and 3 hours of regular pay. So yes, double what they would normally get for working a non-holiday. And if they work one of the big three, then they get triple time. They get, I think so. Have employees other than call firefighters and special police officers eligible for either time and a half, which is a big one. I mean, the other way I wrote it was that that you could just pay time and a half for working a holiday, so that they either get paid. So one is they get paid double time, they get holiday pay, they get straight time. Another way is just straight time and a half, in the sense of if they're working Columbus Day, they get 4.5 hours. And only if they're working the big three do they get 6 hours of pay. So it's either they get 6 hours of pay for working 3 hours, or they get a mix depending on the holiday, 4.5 or 6.
Okay, I follow. So it's going to be 2 times, 2.5 times, or 3 times, depending on the day.
Well, it depends on how you write the amendment, in the sense of, since we're dealing with non-regular part-time employees, it's extremely unlikely they're working 40 hours that week. So this isn't overtime. This is just saying to someone, we're going to give you more money because you're working on a holiday. And so we can either say to that person, if you work Columbus Day, you can get paid time and a half. If you work Thanksgiving, you're going to get double time. But it's not overtime. It's simply the amount that you're going to get paid. The other way of doing it would be that if they work a holiday, no matter what the holiday, they get double time. So you either can have a gradation in the sense of some holidays you get paid time and a half, some holidays you get paid double time, or you get paid time, you get double time for any holiday in essence.
Okay. The only other question that I had was on the, oh, where'd it go? If they are required to work. So I don't know how the police or fire department works, but if are there officers or firefighters that are on call? And if so, would that be considered required to work?
I believe, let me go look at the book, but I believe that for holiday pay, we've already covered the call firefighters and the special police officers. That's why I think I wrote, this is a memo I wrote back the 27th before the hearing.
Charlie, I believe you're correct. I think we already fixed we had instances, at least in the fire department, probably the police similar, where we'd have the full-time employees were getting holiday pay, and we'd have call firefighters because we use them to supplement shift openings.
Yeah.
Where they would not be getting paid holiday pay. They would just get straight time.
And that was a problem.
And what could happen there is where we just technically we're not forcing them, but then we'd have no call. If no call people took that open shift, then I would have to pay it out as overtime, and the union employee would get, in essence, double or triple time. I would have to figure that out.
Yeah,
work that shift.
I'm looking at this because unfortunately I think it's weird, but the holiday pay information may be on the call people. Let's see.
I know as far as the police goes, Charlie, that came up as an article last town meeting, and it was changed to what Chief Rivera stated as well.
I'm trying to find where we've changed it. That's the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Okay, permanent part-time employees. Okay, they get paid granted holiday pay for all holidays in proportion worked. Employees required to work on a holiday are going to get paid the holiday plus the day. Yeah, I thought we had something that said I have a memo. My memo says call firefighters and special police officers are paid a time and a half of regular rate for working the holiday as observed in these bylaws for hours worked, except for Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day. On Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day, they are paid at twice their regular rate for hours worked instead of time and a half. And I'm trying to find. Thought that language was added, and I'm not finding it. I mean, that's what we want, I know, for the call firefighters and the special police officers. I think the question was for anybody else who wasn't in that category. I'm not finding it immediately, and what my recommendation would be that we make sure that there's language in the warrant that describes what we're trying to do, and I'll wait, and when we get to town meeting, you can make a final recommendation.
Okay.
Because I'm fairly sure the language should be there, but I'm not finding it, so I'm not going to be able to point at something. Wait a minute, let me look at one more place. The book itself may be out of date. Yeah, I know the book's out of date. That's my problem. We ended up under 3526 writing in that paragraph I just mentioned, the call firefighters and special police officers. So they're covered already in this situation. You get time and a half for working a holiday other than the big three. They get double time for working the big three. What we're trying to do here is make a determination that if you're not a regular full-time or part-time employee, you're not a call firefighter, and you're not a special police officer, what are we doing for you if you're working a holiday? Are we paying you straight time, which would basically be what it is right now? Or are we gonna pay you time and a half for all holidays other than the big three and double time for working the big three? Or are we gonna pay you double time for working all holidays? If we're following the call firefighter and special police officer rule, which would be my suggestion if we're trying to be equitable to everybody, is that for a person who doesn't fall in those classifications, they're not regular full-time, they're not regular part-time, they're not a call firefighter, they're not a special police officer, but they're working a holiday, they get time and a half during the holiday, but not, again, it's not overtime, it's just simply the rate of pay they get, and they get double time if they're working the big three. I've confused everybody, I'm sure. It's my fault, not yours.
So right now we have a motion to recommend. The Wage and Personnel did recommend, but if folks would be more, if folks want to wait until we have the language that we're going to present to the town, that's completely fine as well.
Yeah, I think Charlie said we can make the recommendation on the floor too, so I prefer to wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now we have a motion to recommend. So does, I believe, Bill, you made the motion. Do you want to rescind and make a motion to table instead?
I'll make a motion to rescind my recommendation and make a motion to table.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up, number 20 on your list, update gender pronouns in 5 parts of the Wage and Personnel bylaw. In your packet. That is on page all right, it begins on page 17, so it's in 5 parts. It's section 35-21.2, 35-26, and then a couple of other changes noted there. I will entertain a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend.
Make a motion to recommend.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I mean, would we have sufficed with they or their, most of these places?
We could, but I even, let's put it this way, I'm an old fogey. You know, if you asked people much younger than I am, you could use those pronouns. What I just did was say, okay, I'm not going to use a personal pronoun. I'm going to use an actual noun instead. It may sound a little awkward, but that way I eliminate any gender debate whatsoever, because I'm not referring to anybody gender pronouns, including they or their.
So I'm just thinking, what if it's a male that identifies as a female or vice versa?
Which is why I've eliminated anything. So for instance, if you look at the changes I've made, there is no gender. There's no he, she, or their. There is simply the noun of the, for instance, the employee or the chief or something like that. It's repetitive. It looks a little awkward, but it eliminates any reference to the person's gender, non-gender, whatever it is. I just completely eliminated it.
Got it, Charlie.
Yeah.
I see it. You got the before and after. Okay.
Yeah, just references like the call firefighter instead of he, she, just say call
Yeah.
firefighter.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Next up, We skipped 21 because right now we haven't any motion on that. Number 22, to disband the Wage and Personnel Board and redistribute its duties to the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, and Treasurer Collector's Office. In your packet, this, I believe it's the last page, but I will double check. Yes, this is on the final page of the PDF, page 22. So you'll note that Charlie has outlined what this sort of this redistribution of duties, so that everything that currently happens now in terms of managing personnel or dealing with all the sort of administrative stuff would still happen. And you'll see the 7 points there as to where those duties would be reassigned or the responsibility and accountability for those items would be redistributed to. So that we can begin discussion, I will entertain a motion to recommend the proposal to disband the Wage and Personnel Board.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Second.
Moved and seconded. What I will just, my 2 cents here is that we haven't had sort of people who aren't already involved on various committees have not volunteered for Wage and Personnel. And those who have, their service has been very much valued, but it was very hard to retain those folks. So the bylaw that says that the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee each have to send someone has been what we've been leaning on for a while now. And that, as you can imagine, makes it difficult, not just sort of the logistics of having a quorum of 2, and there's only 2 of you, but also I think and I know I've said this in meetings before, having to vote or having to wear 2 hats, 1 hat on the wage side, 1 hat on the finance side. I think it makes it very difficult, and I don't want the appearance that we're sort of obfuscating the decision-making process in any way. This would redistribute duties and responsibilities elsewhere to groups who still deal with these things anyway. But takes out this intermediary step that right now I don't think is functioning the way that it was intended. That's my 2 cents serving on the Wage and Personnel Board, but Charlie and Sandy and others certainly have a lot more, interaction with it, and I'm sure feedback on it.
I mean, Sandy, I believe, is occupied elsewhere with a new granddaughter. I'm not sure if the news is
Nice.
but she got a her daughter gave birth to, I think it's Audrey, I can't remember, Marie, and I don't even remember the last name, but about 3:15 this afternoon. She's big baby, something like, I think 8 pounds, 12 ounces, 20.5 inches, but she's a little occupied right now.
Yes, she's allowed to miss this.
So, the idea here is, Melissa said, what we were trying to do was set up a situation that everybody's rights in this process would be respected, in that if for some reason, the worst case example, that if an employee or a resident proposed something and for whatever reason the Finance Committee and or the Board of Selectmen didn't recommend it, that person would have every right to bring that to town meeting and have town meeting make the decision. And because I don't want anybody's right to be able to do that to be terminated. Everybody should have that right. The administrative functions are, while they're important, certainly can be done by the staff here at Town Hall, making sure, for instance, that if someone's eligible for a step increase, that the necessary paperwork, for example, goes to the right people, gets signed off and confirmed by the accountant's office and the treasurer's office and such. But for the regrading and everything like that, in a sense, everything, especially now that we've been operating basically with 1 member from the Finance Committee, 1 member from the Board of Selectmen now for several years, we've had very few non-members from those 2 boards lately, that if the 2 committees are still making recommendations, then we've covered that situation, and in that there is a review process. If an employee, department head, resident comes in, as part of this process and says, hey, I'd like to ask if you folks would recommend making this change in the bylaw. Well, it's going to get reviewed by the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen with recommendations from both. So that person's going to have every opportunity to speak to those boards and bring that forward. And then the boards can recommend, not recommend, and ultimately it's a decision by the town meeting. The only other place really Wage and Personnel has a role is in the grievance process. Grievances right now are only within the bylaw itself. In the sense, if someone feels there's a violation of the bylaw, there's a grievance process, and that person starts off with the department head. Then if they don't still have a disagreement with the department head, it goes to Wage and Personnel. If they disagree with Wage and Personnel, it goes to Board of Selectmen. The number of grievances since I've been here, and it's closing in on 25 years, is fewer than the fingers on my hand during all those years. So it would still leave the possibility of filing a grievance. However, in this case, it just would straight go to the Board of Selectmen. And that, so again, that person would not lose the rights that they have right now to file a grievance and have that grievance heard. So the administrative stuff gets done. The non-administrative stuff, the rights of everybody, residents, employees, department heads are still respected, and there's a process for them to be heard.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
How is it envisioned for the finance committee and board to address the wage and personnel questions that would normally have been handled by the wage and personnel? Joint meetings or separate?
Well, I guess which questions are you asking about?
I guess the first one.
Well, I don't know what the first one is. I'm sorry.
I hear recommendation would be made the finance committee and the board of selectmen, and all amendments, even those not recommended by the committee and board, would be presented at the town
Right.
meeting.
So, I mean, you could do it either way. You could have a joint meeting to discuss the proposed amendments. You could have separate meetings. I mean, right now, you all are being asked in this process to make recommendations on the wage and personnel proposals, whether they come from the wage and personnel board or from employees or residents or department heads. So you're doing that process right now, independently of the board of selectmen. And what happens, I know, is Dennis will inevitably ask the board of selectmen for a recommendation at town meeting. And if I'm doing my job right, I've already, the board of selectmen has reviewed the warrant and said, well, are we going to recommend whether it's the wage and personnel articles or any other articles, or what are we, is someone going to speak to something or whatever? So both committees, both boards are doing the work right now. It really shouldn't be any different, other than, as you mentioned, if you wanted to have a joint meeting at some point, you could do so.
Okay, so this is not stating that, the selectmen meet on Tuesdays and finance is on Mondays, that if we, we'd have to meet on Tuesdays, finance would have to meet on Tuesdays, as selectmen's would have to meet with us on Mondays. So we could do this in silos if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it. So you can do it on different days. You can pick a different day other than a Monday or Tuesday. There's nothing saying that. I mean, you can always have special meetings and have a special meeting with everybody there. Have a special joint meeting. It doesn't have to be on a Monday or Tuesday.
Right, I understand, but to me, that would kind of, then we're disbanding the wage and personnel board is kind of more semantics than if we're still having a separate meeting.
Well, it isn't, it isn't. The major thing here is that you need people to operate the wage and personnel board. And what we've done is drafted people from the selectmen and the wage and the finance committee. And it's a cumbersome system. I mean, I'm going to speak for Melinda and Gordon on this, and one of them's not here, but I don't think that either of them were overly enthused about basically being drafted for the wage and personnel board this year.
Yeah.
Because it was both of them have their own lives outside of this building. Both of them are already serving on one or more committees and doing other town projects. And yet they ended up, I don't know, with the short end of the stick or whatever, with a short straw, but they weren't thrilled to be doing that. I mean, the work still needs to get done, but I'll put it, even if you had a wage and personnel board, all these things still go to you and they go to the board of selectmen. So we've eliminated a step in the process that no one's enthused about doing. If, you know, I suspect that if we had a whole slew of people walking in and saying, I want to serve on the Wage and Personnel Board, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. But during the last 4 or 5 years, the number of non-selectmen, non-finance committee people on this board has been extremely few, if at all. And if, you know, given that we're asking, I mean, in essence, we're spreading the load a little bit to everybody on the finance committee and on the board of selectmen, but the load is already there. You're already making recommendations on the amendments. So it's work you're already doing. It's simply less work for 2 other people who shouldn't have to take on that load.
I'll just add too that I think it makes the decision making a lot cleaner, in that, you know, there's a reason why when we're on the finance committee, with very few exceptions that are sort of relevant to our work, like capital planning and ad hoc committees and wage and personnel, we're not permitted to serve on other committees or boards, because we're supposed to be able to really objectively just look at the budget. And I think that I understand why there's a natural connection to send someone from FinCom and to send someone from Board of Selectmen to Wage and Personnel Board as it is right now. But that sometimes means like me voting one way in Wage and Personnel as a Wage and Personnel member and another way on the Finance Committee as a FinCom member. I don't know if Gordon experiences the same thing or if others have, but I think that's a little difficult for anybody to do, because I think what works so well for us as a finance committee is that we're focused on the budget and that we're focused on money, and that's the lens that we're viewing everything through. And I think to put anyone in the position to have to like switch hats on and off just could potentially conflate the process more.
Hi, it's Barbara. May I ask a question, please?
Sure, Barbara, go ahead.
Currently, we have a meeting in January, and for example, all of these regrading requests or changes come from department heads and whatever through the town employees, basically. Mm-hmm. Where are those questions, like, I think this job should be regraded? Who is that being redistributed to? Who's going to be getting these requests, for lack of a better term, so that people know what's going on with wage and personnel? Like, if without that meeting in January per the bylaw and department heads putting in their requests, the normal person wouldn't know what's going on. So how are we going to be able to still put in requests and know what's going on?
Charlie,
can I answer that?
Yeah, I was good. Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
So in the memo I wrote back in December, what I wrote, and not reading from the exact language of the bylaw, but I'm reading the synopsis, was I said, amendments to the wage and personnel bylaw would be submitted to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen with a copy to the town clerk's office. The hearing would still be held. Recommendations would be made by the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, and all amendments, even those not recommended by the committee and the board, would be presented at town meeting. So in essence, both boards are still fulfilling the function of the Wage and Personnel Board. And there would still be a process in the bylaw itself stating that, you know, amendments can be submitted, there'll be a hearing, there'll be recommendations from both boards.
Okay, all right. I didn't remember the language. I know something was going on and trying to change it. I just wanted to make sure, because how else would people know what was going on or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point, Barbara. And I think ultimately too, when these decisions are going to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, whose meetings I think just get more kind of attention, and you know, given like the postings of them, I think we're more likely to get even more folks involved and to have them show up if they're already showing up for other things from FinCom or Board of Selectmen too.
Well, it's a good example with like the regrading, that the whole list that you have. Mm-hmm. If it's out there that I'm asking for this, then everyone follows suit to make sure we're all on the same page and not one another and causing feelings and blah, 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 you know, whatever. So as long as you can still put it in to be a hearing and everyone could be on the same page if they choose to be. They may not, but if they choose to be, there is that option. That was my only point.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Barbara. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. I'll call for the vote. All those for the Finance Committee to recommend disbanding the Wage and Personnel Board. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Finance Committee recommends. Those are all the ones that we as a Finance Committee have that have been recommended or that have recommendations on them from Wage and Personnel coming to us. Everything else is going to have to be, should there be a town meeting, would have to be on the floor. We're hoping to get some, I'd like to get everything done this Thursday, but at that point it's going to press on the same day, so we wouldn't have recommendations through the Finance Committee at that time.
And
Melinda, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So on that number 16, the one that I went through
Mhm.
for the incentive, and Wage and Personnel did not recommend and Finance Committee did not recommend. So does that have to go on the warrant? Because I don't want to speak to something at town meeting that neither the Wage and Personnel doesn't recommend or the Finance Committee doesn't recommend.
Melinda, can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
So right now, under the bylaws, Article 2 is the Wage and Personnel Board's article, and traditionally, they only put those proposals they're recommending. It's
Okay.
by precedent, by practice, if somebody who disagrees with the Wage and Personnel Board in a sense of person X puts in a proposal for an amendment, a change to the Wage and Personnel Board, and Wage and Personnel doesn't recommend, that person has the right to go to town meeting, even if the item isn't on the agenda, on the warrant, and ask for that to be voted upon. What I've done in the past is there'll be a published list on the town's website along with the warrant of those things that the Wage and Personnel is not recommending. And I think, I don't know if it was Eugene, maybe somebody else asked me a few months ago, if somebody does want something, how do I put this? If Wage and Personnel doesn't recommend something and that person doesn't want it even mentioned at all, even on the website, can it not be listed? And I said, sure. You know, if person X says, Charlie, Wage and Personnel is not recommending my amendment, can I make sure that it's not on the list on the website? And that's fine. I'm happy to take it off. I mean, it's up to that individual person. I'll follow what they want to do. But the general practice has been that anything that's not recommended goes on that separate list on the website. It just doesn't show up on the warrant. But anything that shows up on the website can be brought to town meeting if somebody wants to bring it up.
Oh, I'm okay with it showing up on the website that I actually made that recommendation. But I don't want to speak to it at town meeting because I completely respect Wage and Personnel and Finance Committee decisions. So if I don't, I'd rather not have it on the warrant.
Yeah. It won't be on the warrant,
Okay.
and it'll just be on the website. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so that will leave us with the general budget discussions.
Ugh.
Feeling exactly. All right, let me, so I guess, can we deal with the correspondence from Charlie concerning these budget issues, if folks don't mind? I know they were brought up under correspondence, but they do all pertain to budget, which is why we moved them here. The first off being the zoning bylaw article. This is under Charlie's email dated Sunday, May 10th. Currently, we have Article A25 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of $65,000 to pay for a complete revision of the town zoning bylaws or take any action thereon. Do we still, first of all, do we still want to place this on the warrant, given the sum, and or do we want to talk about potential alternatives, as Charlie mentioned, like a smaller amount for specific purposes?
The 65,000 for the complete overhaul, as you said, right?
No.
That's phase one.
That's
Yeah,
just
that's
phase
what
one,
we
yeah.
found out was that it
Yeah.
would be phase one. I think it would cover significant sections of the bylaw. But when I had corresponded with Attorney Questle, if I can find the email where she said specifically this would only be one phase. I mean, the alternative is to do a smaller amount and probably some combination of the planning board, ZBA, and the selectmen say to Amy, look, let's pick one or two places or three or four places that we really need to focus on. I'll give you an example, the in-law apartment section, and say, let's get that done for May of 2021. And then, we'll play it by ear. I mean, I think, the Finance Committee had a good idea that we really do need to recodify the zoning bylaw. But given our other priorities with the capital budget and just given the town's finances, I don't know how easy it's going to be to make the case that we should go to town meeting or ask the voters to spend that amount of money on something they very likely aren't going to see as very important. I'm not saying you should. I'm just, it may be a battle that we don't win in terms of going for it. That's all.
Okay. In the law account, we're looking to increase it by 50 grand. Is that all in relation to expected litigation?
Yeah, well, expected litigation, we'll have all the contracts up again, probably one way or the other, I suspect, next year. But we've got the litigation, we've got land use, we've got the regular town council. And I think right now, Melinda and Melinda, I think we're at 90 right now. I originally asked for the 50 that Bill mentioned to get up.
Yeah,
to
90 as of last week.
Yeah.
Pardon?
90 as of last week.
But yeah, that would, I mean, that might, we've been working with Amy Questle on the multifamily bylaw. It's just one small section. We've got something, that's before the planning board is their public hearing. I'm sure if I went back, I could calculate how much money we spent, but it was a series of really 4 maybe meetings, I think, and a number of drafts that she needed to do. I'm hoping that we wouldn't have to go through that process, but the multifamily bylaws you might expect was a fairly contentious situation with a number of interested parties. I'm hoping that if we can pick and choose a few places, we'll be able to go farther with the dollars we do have, whether it's in the law budget or whether it's in this special article. But we're not going to get that far within the law budget, given that even without Amy's work on the multifamily, I mean, last year, for instance, we spent something like 120 to 130,000. And we easily have run out of money for the year we're in now. And I'm getting, unfortunately, I'm getting more lawsuits. I'm expecting more lawsuits, let's put it this way, than I would like on one matter.
So Charlie, is it safe to say that if we ponied up for the 65,000 and whatever that happens to cover in phase one, that we'd more than offset the expected litigation costs by making the changes to the zoning bylaw?
No, because the litigation we have is based on permits that have been issued during the last few years. It's not based on new changes. I mean, it might help. How do I put this? We haven't, the only litigation we've had for Halifax, we have 2 zoning areas that we're litigating right now. One is Amanda's Estates. We've spent, as of March 31st, I think it was about $93,000. I don't mean for this year, but total. Since the matter started being litigated, we spent about $93,000. Maybe a change in the bylaw would have, if we had a different bylaw back then, 5 years ago, who knows? I don't know. But we're not dealing with a lot of litigation on a lot of matters. We've got that one case, which is using up obviously a large amount of the town resources. We've got one case where the town itself has gone to court because we have landowner with a zoning violation that we're slowly trying to move to enforce. One of the hurdles being that I don't have infinite resources to do that. But it's not a situation that we're getting lots of litigation in a lot of areas. What we do know is that much of the bylaw was written 55 years ago. It's not updated. Those sections that we've tried to update in the last 20 years, so again, I'll give you the in-law. I think what we were trying to do back in the late 90s was set up a situation that was a compromise between not having in-law apartments and allowing in-law apartments. And then, okay, so we put in a bunch of stipulations. And looking at it now, 20 years later, we're saying, well, wait a minute. This isn't exactly what, it's not working exactly with the way it should work, especially with the building code. And it's not litigation that's causing the problem. It's a review of that of the zoning and saying, is this what we actually wanted? And is this actually viable now? So it's not, that's the reason for the interest in making changes. I know that the Finance Committee connected the two dots in the sense of saying, we have all this litigation, we should update the bylaw to eliminate the litigation. But in some cases, it doesn't matter what bylaw you have. Someone who is an interested party has a right to sue the town, even if the town or the town bodies think it followed the correct procedure. And so that, obviously a better written bylaw helps to lower the risks of having litigation, and better decision-making helps to lower litigation. But it doesn't prevent someone who feels that they have been damaged by a decision of the planning board or the ZBA or the building inspector to file the litigation. What we're trying to emphasize during the last couple of years is whatever decisions are made are more defensible. And so we have a better chance in the end of winning, and maybe communicating that fact to a potential litigant who says, you know what? I don't like the decision. I think it was wrong, but I don't think I'm going to win going to court because the ZBA or the planner or the building inspector has made a defensible decision to the extent that I'm not going to win and I don't want to waste the money doing so. But I don't know, sorry, yeah, sorry. I could talk, I don't want to talk all night about it.
No, it's okay. I was just going to ask, I know right now it's under raise and appropriate, but is there any argument to be made for a stabilization fund? And no, it would require a 2/3 vote, but this seems to be more in the lines of like a long-term planning type issue, which I know is what our policy indicates.
I'm not sure why it would be raise and appropriate. I mean, you're completely right. It's either a one time, but it's not a raise and appropriate. I would never do that.
Okay. So then we don't have to, so then we're not, so we could then conceivably do
free cash
transfer from available funds.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I mean, I personally would be comfortable with transferring from stabilization funds for this, because then it does have that added like breaker of the 2/3 vote, and it is like a long-term issue. I personally would be uncomfortable with making it raise and appropriate. Like Charlie, like I didn't know if we had to for any reason, but that we don't have to. That makes me more comfortable with the idea personally.
I'll tell you, in terms of the finances for the town, I would not do it from stabilization. Even before this crisis, we were lower than the benchmarks we want to hit.
Yeah.
And I don't see any opportunity unless we get to the end of the meeting, whenever we have it, and we have money left over out of free cash to supplement the stabilization fund. We should be putting more money into it rather than taking money out at this point. I mean, I've always assumed that, as it is from on all these, almost all the articles outside of the budget, that this would be nominally a free cash situation. But I mean, stabilization's available, and that the town, if you and the town feel otherwise, by all means.
think if my thing was more of given that it's a legal issue, I didn't know if there were any like restrictions on what fund, what sources it could come from or not, but
Nope.
I would equally be fine with free cash. So should we take a vote to see if the finance committee wants to place this article on the warrant?
Are you asking me?
What?
Yes.
I guess I'm the ether. I'm asking to. I'll ask the cat. Do we? I think procedurally, because it would be ours, or the one that we're placing on it. Should we take a vote, like kind of philosophically, that we want to do this, and then a second vote to the actual, like what the text should be, or is it sufficient to just make a motion to recommend an article that says blah blah blah?
Well, I think we can make a motion and then take a vote on it, right?
Yeah, what's the motion? To recommend or to pull?
I would entertain a motion to recommend Article A25 to see if the town will vote to transfer from available free cash the sum of $65,000 to pay for a complete revision of the town zoning bylaws or take any action thereon.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. So discussion.
And so what happens later when we do in the budget, we find out we don't have the cash?
I think in free cash that we were fine. That was my understanding, was that we were fine, especially since we were turning down some of or that we did not recommend some of the articles that had been factored in.
I thought it was tight. Let me take another look.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to pull up the latest one too.
Oh. Yeah, I think we're okay too, Melinda. Looks like we didn't recommend a number of these.
Yeah. And some of the bigger ticket things, like just on that articles list, some of the bigger ticket stuff too wasn't out of free cash.
Yeah.
I guess, as with many things, I think my argument tends to be that it's not going to get any cheaper. Like if it's something that we need to do, it's not going to get any cheaper. And the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets in one way or another, right? Like we're going to pay for it now, we're going to pay for it later in whatever capacity. That tends to be my personal feeling about something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like we'll be okay.
Any further questions? All those in favor of Article A25, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, I will mark the spreadsheet, and I'm going to make a note in that column for free cash. Okay. All right, so that is, let me go back to the email. Okay, so the next, we have the draft of warrant. Okay, thank you, Charlie, for that. Landfill Article A37. The Board of Health has an estimate of about $72,000. So there's the attached amounts. This is for Article A37, which we had on our most updated spreadsheet. Let's see what the estimate was on the spreadsheet. I don't think we have it on this one, actually. Yeah, this one wasn't, the landfill was not on,
Not on this one.
no. All right, so let's take a look at the documents if you haven't had a chance to do it yet. Charlie, do you have a sense of the sort of immediacy of this? I mean, I would assume it's immediate, just
Yeah.
given that
Yeah,
it's about the land.
legally, we're obliged to do it. There's really no choice in the matter.
Okay. 37. Do we know, Charlie, was there an idea that this would come out of free cash as well?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do 72,000. All right, so we can keep looking and discussing, but I will entertain a motion to recommend Article A37 landfill repair in the amount of $72,000 from free cash.
Make a motion to recommend.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Okay, we can keep taking a look. I'm looking at the estimates. Then the estimate came in at 71,800, but for safety's sake, we'll put it at 72,000.
Is one of these, the erosion report is dated 2008. Is this the right?
That's when I believe the landfill was capped. The erosion came out, the erosion problem developed during the last few months. Let me look.
Yeah, okay. It's a little unclear to me because it opens with saying on February 15th, 2008, and an erosion issue was noted.
Let me look. Which one are you looking at, Bill?
The one that says erosion report, February 2008.
2008.
I don't know why, unless this was, I'll follow up. Let me do that. Because the only thing I can think of is that this is a repeat problem, possibly. I don't know. But it isn't related. I know what we need to fix is something that happened during the last few months. It's not because of something that happened 12 years ago.
Okay. I'd like to get that clarification. Obviously, we don't want to pay for the same thing twice.
Okay, so we have a motion to recommend. Do you want to withdraw and make a motion to table for further information?
I'll make a motion to withdraw and a motion to table.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I'm going to make a note for hold on A37. Okay, so in looking at the articles, as far as I know, or from what I remember, at our last meeting, we made it through. I don't think this one has updates on it.
Mine doesn't.
Mine, okay. Let me pull up mine from last week. It says I can't. It says my file won't open. I don't know.
I
why.
have that you definitely voted through Article 11.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, that I remember. A12 was, they had struck. A13's already recommended. A14 to reimburse the housing authority. The
Yeah,
amount.
I would still, I don't recommend making a recommendation. I would say
Okay,
recommendation to me. As I said to the board Friday, Selectman, I've looked at this a little bit. I'm sure the town owes housing authority something, but I haven't been able to confirm the numbers that the housing authority thinks exist with the retirement association. Until I do, I certainly would not go to town meeting myself and recommend approval of the article until I got everybody with the same numbers.
Okay.
So I'm certainly not asking you all to make a recommendation about tonight.
Okay. We made a recommendation at A15 already, the assessor's triennial. I thought we also made a recommendation on A16, the middle school resource officer.
We did.
Okay. A17, the truck inspector.
I don't show that we made a recommendation.
Okay, I don't have it. All right, so I'll entertain a motion on A17, the truck inspector, in the amount of $20,000.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Moved and seconded. From what I remember, the conversation that we had when we talked about this with the petitioner was that they definitely want to see some changes made, but I think Chief Shavs and the petitioner had a good conversation about potential alternatives that are not a truck, like having an inspector there. So I think that was sort of where we left it, that might not be the best way to get the trucks to stop speeding on that particular road.
Yep. Remind me, did the petitioner state that they would pull this article?
I don't remember. I don't think he said he would pull, but I think he agreed and he wanted to seek out some alternatives, and he understood the chief. This is my recollection. He understood the chief's rationale as to why having the inspector there would not be the best way to go.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of A17, the truck inspector, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, does not recommend. A18, grade all unpaved roads. This is a petition article as well.
Yeah, I think this was to perform a second grading.
Right.
Right. Highway Department got a first grading done this spring. I wrote Steve about this earlier today, went back and forth. I think the petitioners thought that in essence, we weren't going to spend money on grading and wanted to make sure there was a dedicated amount for grading. Now that Steve's graded it, the article is still on there because it's a petition article. Steve, I think, spent about $11,000, maybe a little bit less this spring on doing the grading and rolling. So what I've said is, okay, if we're going to do this again, it's going to be another $11,000 whenever we get it done, whether it's this fall or next spring or whenever. But it's a petition article, so I'm obligated to leave it on the warrant. But that would be about the amount that we would need if the town meeting wanted to approve it.
Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of A18, grading all unpaved roads in the amount of $20,000, please signify by saying aye.
Did we make a motion yet?
Oh, I'm sorry. On chain of motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. I'll call for a vote on A18, grading all unpaved roads. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Opposed. Any abstentions? All right, A19 and A20, A19 repair and improve pasture lane, and A20 purchase of streetlights in Halifax. have no dollar amounts on them, so we'll hold. A22, the new roof for Pope's Tavern. Charlie, do you know if we got the final estimates in on this?
That's the whole problem. In fact, that's why we took out the 250 and put in a sum of money. See, the last thing I heard from Scott was that we're still weeks away from even getting the plans and specifications. And the board talked about, the selectmen talked about this on Friday, and they said, we don't want to put a sum of money, not the literal language of sum of money. We don't want to put a specific amount in there, go to town meeting, vote it, and have even a week later find out that the bids came in and it's 350. I won't say the fire suppression thing was a debacle. We needed to get it done and the bids came in very high. But I'm not interested in repeating that situation. We need to get the work done, but I also don't want to go to town meeting without a bid in hand. And we're not going to have that almost certainly before June 15th. I think there's a possibility that if the meeting's delayed past then, we'll be able to have a bid in hand and go to town meeting and say, this is the specific amount of money we need. But the board got more uncomfortable on Friday about leaving the 250 in there and changed it to a sum of money.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to recommend a 22 new roof for Pope's Tavern in an as yet undetermined sum of money.
And then we'll take the vote on the floor, right?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to recommend as worded.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. So obviously we can change our recommendation on the floor depending on the dollar amount. I think at this point, this seems like more of a philosophical vote that, we think that this is a worthy project, and then we'll sort of see how the money shakes out. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. A26 South Coastal Counties Legal Services. Charlie, I know this one usually we get down to the wire on. Is this amount fixed, or have you?
It's 35. We've been at 3,500 now for more than a decade.
Okay. Okay.
So I show that we already voted 37, 26 and 27.
So do I.
Oh, good. I have 27 marked on this one, but not 26. But that does make sense. All right. Do we have, I don't think we got to A30.
No, 31, 32, and 30, 31, and 32 are the only remaining open ones that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So A30 folding chairs for Selectmen's Meeting Room in Great Hall in the amount of $3,000. I'll entertain a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend A30.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Now, I believe Scott said that this was something that he could wait on if we needed him to. I'm pretty sure that when we had him in, that he said the priority was really the insulation and vapor barrier and the overhead doors.
Mm-hmm.
We already voted to recommend the overhead doors.
There's no safety concerns with the existing chairs, right? And then the rubber feet on the bottom aren't missing, so they're gonna screw up the floors.
I mean, every once in a while, someone sits in a chair and finds the bad one. And there's the bad stack that like grows. I think there are probably a sufficient number, but Scott's idea was that they'd be the nicer like folding ones like they have over in the assembly room and stuff. He could wait, but
I lean toward whatever Steve says.
yeah, I mean, I get it. If we can wait another year on it. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstentions? Okay. It's going to be quite the political statement for those of us that sit in the squishy chairs. A31, the installation of vapor barrier in the old section of Town Barn in the amount of $13,000. I'll entertain a motion to recommend.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. I think this was sort of like Scott's number 2 priority after the overhead doors, from what I remember.
I don't remember. Is this based on a real bid or is this an estimate?
I don't know. I can find out.
I feel like it's an estimate.
I have no idea. I mean, I know what insulation and vapor barriers are, but I have no idea what it would cost. I don't know if it's high or low. I'm presuming he's.
Not that Scott's gonna reply right now, but I'll send him a note asking whether, if we've got an estimate in hand, we got a bid in hand, what the situation. I doubt that we have a bid in hand, but we may have an estimate.
So do you want to rescind your motion and instead move to table?
Sure.
Okay.
I make a motion to rescind my motion and move to table.
Seconded.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll hold on that one. A32, sound reduction panels for the library in the amount of $6,000. I'll entertain a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. I think this was Scott's way of fixing some of the, rather than doing like a complete reworking of the library to improve like the quality, the audio inside or the lack thereof inside, he was going to put up those panels, like the ones that buffer sound.
Yeah, my recollection was that he got a quote for like 40-something thousand maybe. And
Yeah.
he feels as though he can do this for much lower than this, hence the $6,000 number.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot, Jean, if you're still around, but just because, you know, for the speaking on behalf of the library, what is your kind of feeling about the priority ranking of the sound panels?
I would say that if Scott, I wasn't aware that Scott got or has this number of this article was there. I'm happy to hear that because it really is an issue in the library. I mean, nobody knows what's gonna happen going forward with large crowds in the building and things like that. But if there is a large crowd in the building, then it's really a problem in the building. So it's definitely a problem. Is it a problem going to be going forward? I don't know, but it seems like a very reasonable price since the price that he got was, you know, it was in the 47,000s for a very elaborate, you know, system.
Yeah.
And I would never, you know, say that it's a priority to spend $47,000, but $6,000 seems, I'm sure Scott knows what he's doing, and that seems like a reasonable price for that.
So here's a question. Can this, I know right now it's as an article for free cash, but Charlie, is there, and Jean too, just because of the funding kind of schema that we have to fit to maintain that network status for the library, can this, like if this were to be placed in your expense budget, basically can we count this expenditure toward your budget for the year?
We can, yes, we could put that, as long as it's appropriated into my budget, it would be considered, yes, it would go towards my certification.
Okay.
And so my certification number, what I'm minus is 40, let me get the exact number, is 4,823 is what I'm short. So this would give me a little bit over. So yes, that might be a great solution.
Okay.
So kind of fixing two problems with one stone.
Yeah. Charlie, is there anything that would prevent us from doing this, from placing, now, so Jean, just to clarify, would we have to move that amount into the library's expense line, or can this exist as like a free cash item, but then we explain in the documentation that this went specifically to the library.
No, it would have to be put into the library expense budget.
Okay.
So it would be put into the, and we've done that with capital items before, like
Yeah,
when
like
I
computers,
spend
right?
my computers. I'm not anticipating that, I'd rather do this than buy computers. I
Yeah.
think I would be fine without getting computers,
Okay.
you know, for another year. So I'd rather put that money into my expense budget, and then not do computers.
Okay. Charlie, is this a viable way to address this? If we vote to recommend the soundproofing, can we place this within Jean's expense budget so that she can count it for certification?
You could either do one or two things. You could either put it, you could put it in the expense budget now, in the sense of go back to Article 4, increase the line item by the appropriate amount with, you know, obviously we're all documenting this. Jean's not going to go off and buy something else instead of having to
No.
settle in there. So, you know, we just do it and everybody knows what we're doing with the money and it's all set. It's perfectly, or you wait until town meeting and we get to the line item and we say, hey, folks, there's this article over here, but we're going to use the money that we would have done for the article and put it in the expense budget for the same reason. It may be easier to do it now. You could even put a note, you know, a footnote that says, you know, letter, whatever it's going to be in Article 4, this amount in the expense budget is for this project.
Okay.
And then also, so if you just appropriate that for that project, and Scott does it for 5,000, it doesn't matter what I spend out of my expense budget. It matters what's appropriated.
Right.
So
right.
if Scott comes in and he does it for, you know, $5,000, that's, you know, $1,000 that I'm going to turn back to the town.
Right.
The following year.
Right.
And that will be fine.
Perfect. So I guess what is the, sorry, I'm only off video because I have to plug in my power source and I don't want to take you on a tour of my house. What, members of the finance committee, what's your kind of feeling on this about the project itself and this idea of the funding?
I think the project is needed. I think, if I remember right, Jean's been asking for this. This is 3 years now in a row. And I'm indifferent on how it's funded, I guess.
I agree with it, and it might be easy if it's in the Article 4. So, because, you know, there you're basically saying, here's the whole budget, as opposed to, oh, here's an article, which people might sit there and say, well, why is that needed when I'm unemployed and all this other stuff? I think it's easier to get it through if you just stick it back into the expense.
Yeah, and I like
That's
the
a good
idea
point.
of putting the footnote in that it's essentially a capital project, but that, you know, for certification purposes, we're gonna place the funding for it here. Okay, that being said, I would entertain a motion. Oh, actually, we already moved in second. So let's take the recommendation first, and then we'll take a vote on, we'll go back into Article 4 and move it over there. So I'll entertain a vote on A32 sound reduction panels for the library in the amount of $6,000. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. If we could go back to the FY21 expenditure sheet. And we would be line 127, library expense. Okay. So we would add $6,000 to that amount. So currently we have it recommended at $89,349. So add 6,000. So the new amount would be $95,349.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for paneling. All right, I would entertain a motion for the finance committee to recommend $95,349 on line 127 library expense.
So moved.
Moved,
Seconded.
motion and second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, so we already recommended the 89,349. Do we need to address that in any way?
Yeah, so maybe we should, all right, so let's, do you want to rescind your motion on 95,349 and we'll go back and revoke the 89?
I rescind my motion on 95,349.
Seconded.
All right, so entertain a motion to revoke the recommendation for line 127 library expense, the amount of $89,349.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion for the finance committee to recommend the amount of $95,349 for line 127 library expense.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and that takes us to the end.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
that just,
Thank you.
So-
Thank you.
Well,
so-
thank you for helping us with for problem solving with us.
so that warrant just gets moved, but we won't put that one out there.
Yeah, so we're gonna strike A32 because now that's in Article 4.
Okay. Last thing you want is to end up two places.
We've already been accused of having a slush fund once.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see anything else on here. Charlie, in terms of like our task lists, is there anything else that we need to do this evening in terms of what we have? Because that library expense, I mean, we have the elementary schools, but we have the schools and that's all. I mean, we can't, I haven't heard anything from that yet. Hey, Charlie.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Since we don't have anything updated on the schools, is there anything else like task-wise you need us to do tonight?
How do I put this? I know stuff I can't tell you.
Ooh.
Secret stuff. I think it's going to be very difficult. I don't mean that necessarily that everybody in the school committee is unaware of the situation we're in,
Mhm.
but I think it's going to be an interesting time trying to, for them and for us, trying to deal with the differing priorities that various parties have. Having
Okay.
said that, I think the safest thing to do, and I've already, I think you noticed right at the beginning of the warrant, after, this would be after the Finance Committee report and everything else, along with what I always mention now about the lottery system. I put a very short paragraph. This warrant's being printed at a time when there are many uncertainties due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, the budget, the recommendations of the Finance Committee are all subject to change. I mean, I'm not going to put in a huge note about, and it's not just the school, it's everything. But I think the safest thing, so that people are given, in essence, an alert that everything's subject to change, would be to level fund both Silver Lake, the regular budget. I mean, we know we need to make the commitments on the VOTEC, on the transportation for special ed, the tuition for special ed and such. But for the regular budget or assessment for Silver Lake and the regular budget for Halifax Elementary, and just level fund it. And then put, again, footnotes down at the bottom of Article 4 to say, the Finance Committee recommendation shown above either is subject to change or will change or is still being in process, and this serves as a placeholder or something like that. I think any other number you would put in there would be fairly arbitrary. At least this way, we're indicating that the situation is serious and we're going to have to give a lot of consideration to how we balance a budget, including the school. I think you saw my note.
Yeah.
I thought I included you on my note that I sent to the schools
Yeah.
back last week. That having reviewed everything, gotten the information from the school system on just Halifax Elementary, and this was just the teachers on the step increases, that I said, based on the money that we still had left in Article 4, after the Finance Committee had made decisions on things like Medicare and the elections and the law account, that there was not going to be sufficient funding, I thought, to do step increases for next year. It's going to be a case-by-case situation. Melinda, as it is, I think I wrote to you about wage and personnel and said, I think we're going to need to have another amendment in there to say, I'm not saying that's where we end up, because a lot of it's going to depend on the state funding. We'll see how it plays out, but at least allow the possibility of a step freeze, in essence, to say whatever anyone's earning on June 30th in a month and a half is what they're earning for the rest for fiscal 21. And it doesn't make me happy saying that. With everybody else, including the schools, the difficulty will be that they have contracts. It's not a simple, and this is police, fire, highway, and the school system. It's, we can vote a bylaw at town meeting. It takes both sides to change a contract. And so if there are step increases, even without a new contract on July 1st, if there are step increases that are part either of the bylaw or of contracts, then we're obliged to, in fact, have those step increases occur. So if someone moves from step 3 to step 4 from June 30th to July 1st, we're obligated to do that. The challenge for us is then to say, okay, if we have to do that, but we don't have enough money to do that, at some point, and I don't mean some point as in we wait until August or October, whatever, but at some point we then go back to the departments that we have. Let's assume the wage and personnel folks and the contractual folks, meaning those folks with specific contracts, we don't have increases for them. There's a step freeze. Nobody gets an increase for wage and personnel or for the personal contracts. Then we go back and we get to a department and we work with those unions and we say, here's the situation. We've got a certain amount of money. We'd like to talk to you about a step freeze. And if a union, and I'm not saying we're entering in negotiations or anything, not all this is public information because it's all math. It's not specific to one contract or anything. But if we were to say to a union that we have a certain amount of money for this department, if you are going to insist that the step increases occur, we understand that. You have every right to. If we can't negotiate a contract with you, that contract, even without a cost of living increase, still is valid on July 1st, and the town is obligated to enforce the stipulations of the contract. But if we only have a certain amount of money and we still have to do step increases, it comes from someplace else. And I'm not going to be, the town may feel very differently than I do, but I'm not putting the burden of the cost of one department on the cost of another, in the sense of simply because Department X has a union that says we're not willing to agree to a step freeze, even though you're doing it with other unions or you're doing it with non-union personnel, then I'm not going to go to Department Y and say, hey, you need to make up the difference. Now, town meeting, you all, selectmen, town meeting may feel very differently. You may have a priority and say, yes, we're going to fund those step increases for Department X, but not for Department Y. That's going to be, up to it. But one place or another, the money is going to be coming to fund those step increases. And so, for instance, if we have a Department X that has an overtime budget. If we can't change the contract to allow for a step increase, then it may be that we have to cut overtime to make up for that. I mean, we've got, and what I'm talking about is 351 cities and towns are dealing with the same thing. You know, I have colleagues out on the South Shore, I have colleagues elsewhere, you know, they've already done furloughs any number of places. Now, some of that is budget, some of that is lack of work, in the sense of they've made a decision that they can't continue to pay people for not working. And that's the year we're in now, fiscal 20. We haven't done that here in Halifax. I don't know if we're going to do that before June 30th. I keep talking with the selectmen about that. And as we get closer to any soft opening, those conversations get more serious. But setting aside furloughs, cities and towns are looking at what numbers, you know, revenue they're going to have, and saying, we can't afford this one way or the other. We can't continue these contracts at this level of service and have a balanced budget next year. And that's where we are, in the sense of either the contract gives way or a certain level of service gives way. We're not, I mean, where we are right now is not in a place that certainly, I don't know about the schools. The schools are their own creature, obviously, so I won't speak for them. But on the town side, I don't see a reason, for instance, to talk about layoffs. You know, layoff has two problems. Obviously, the service level is one. Two is one person is a large chunk of money. And I'm not, you know, ethically, I'm not quite sure that I want to say, okay, this person's being sacrificed for everybody else. But three is then you have the unemployment costs. And so, you know, the 50,000 that you might think you're saving during next year is not 50,000. And it's going to be a lot less than that. So then you have to lay two people off, and so forth. But I don't think, we're not in that crisis situation. We talk, you know, when we talk about outlining how far we can get into the budget, what could we do a COLA, for instance, for everybody? Well, we can't. Can we do step increases for everybody? I thought there was a possibility we could. It turns out we're close, but we're not there. So I said, okay, then you have to do a budget that says no step increases. Can we do that and fit everything? Yeah, absolutely. But it requires cooperation from everybody to say June 30th wages and salaries are going to be what they are for fiscal 21. And if we have a department we're not going to be able to do that with, then the money to make that happen is going to be cut someplace else, whether it's in that department budget or someplace else in another department. And unless the town, through you all and the board of selectmen and the finance committee and the town meeting, makes a decision, we're going to have a priority, we're going to fund the step increases for this budget and cut someplace else to make it up, then those step increases are going to be funded internally in each of those departments. It's very easy under wage and personnel if we can get town meeting and you all to agree to do no step increases for next year. We'll make some minor changes because there are people in mid-step. There are people who get a step on September 1st or November 1st or December 28th or whatever their anniversary dates is. And we can fit those in. We have sufficient money to do that. And it's a much easier process. All we have to go to town meeting, convince townspeople to do it. But it's much more difficult when we're dealing with unions. But there are always options. So I think, you know, for the school, going back to the schools, I think this is one of the points when we're trying to get the word out, is this is what we had to do with the school budget right now. It's not permanent. We're not saying this is the number we'll go to town meeting with, but you have to understand how serious things are. And that's why we're level funding the budget right now. We'll bring a final recommendation to town meeting on June 15th or whatever date we end up having town meeting. I'm sorry for the long monologue. Obviously, I've been having to be thinking about this situation almost every day.
No, but I appreciate Charlie, because it helps. It's, you know, it's tough because we're looking at stuff kind of siloed sometimes, but it's zero sum. So as of right now, we have both the schools funded at their FY20 levels. So we'll leave that as it is. And then that's a change that we can make on the floor or beforehand. I mean, with that, we've gotten through Article 4 with all the info that we have. Unless there's anything you want us to revisit, I can get the letter worked up probably tomorrow and get it out to everybody. And that will be kind of as much as we can do before the warrant goes to print. We'll still keep working on things, especially as other, like the wage and personnel, more than half of those haven't left wage and personnel yet to come to FinCom, so we'll have to handle those. And then as we get updated figures on the things that we've asked for, we can make recommendations on those as well. Do we have any public participation? Okay, for calendar, I think we've already blocked off every Monday besides Memorial Day in May.
We have.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you, Linda, too, for changing the agenda to say reserve fund and line item transfers. That's helpful.
Linda, while we've been talking, I had sent Scott an email.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know that they have to do this. I mean, I think you need to talk to the building committee. So let me read. He spoke with Burt Gaynor, who's the new chair, John Campbell having resigned a couple of months ago. Regarding the articles in the coming year's projected economy, the committee and myself have agreed to withdraw all articles with the exception of the roof project, the Pope's Tavern. We spoke with the architect about this today and expressed our need to get our plans for the roof as soon as possible, in interest of getting a bid as soon as possible, hopefully in time for town meeting. Hope this helps. Let me know if you need anything further. I'll follow up with Scott. It's up to you all what you want me to tell him. But my understanding, or unless there was a radical change, I guess the question is, let's say for the heck of it that the roof is $250. I don't know. But if it was $250, is there sufficient money right now in free cash to fund that with the other projects? Or are we going to, or do we need to take out the vapor barrier and the doors in order to fit a $250 or a little bit more roof project? I guess the question is, how much money right now do you have in unused free cash?
We added in but we don't know about the landfill though, too.
Right. Well, I would expect, let's assume for the moment, I don't know why it has the 2008 report in there, but let's assume that you've got to spend the 70,000 or so for the landfill.
So free cash, we have $1,191,655.
I mean, if everything passes,
Yes.
including the stuff that we didn't recommend, according to Sandy.
Recommendations, because one way or the other, we have to have a balanced budget, even on the free cash side. There's a limit on the free cash.
Right. Oh, so Sandy has 327,498 as remaining funds.
Then, is the 250 for the roof included in the 327?
No, I'll put that back in. So if it's 250, her number comes up to 77,498, and you said 75 for the landfill?
72.
Yeah.
72, so that'll leave 5,000.
I mean, it's up to you. I mean, I wouldn't say to Scott that the only way you're going to get the roof is that you take these other projects away. I think the best thing for the town is that you leave those projects on there along with the roof and say to him, look, we appreciate the priorities from the building committee. If we get to push comes to shove, and the only way of funding the roof is not doing these two other projects, then that's what we'll do. That's what we'll recommend. But why don't the committee leave these things on here for right now?
I mean, that's personally what I prefer, just because he said, especially the overhead doors are such a need, and that was his #1 priority, that I'd like to see us try to fit stuff. And then if we have to sacrifice, we'll sacrifice the vapor barrier first. Yeah. And then the overhead doors would be the last to go if we had to. That, to my mind, I agree. I don't want to see them just pull everything out of being overly cautious at this point. Does anyone else have any feedback? Do you want building to pull everything, or do you want to kind of see how it plays out?
I don't know, for me, it's pretty tight. I'd like to kind of cut where we can. I mean, 831 for that vapor barrier.
Yeah. Well, would we feel comfortable telling him that like that's right now that's on the margins, and if like that would be the first thing to go if we had to, or ask them if how they would feel about cutting the vapor barrier but leaving the overhead doors in just because they said it was such a priority for them?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, putting that at the margins.
Okay.
Me personally.
Fred or Cheryl, do you have any?
It's fine. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Cheryl's nodding too. So Charlie, would you mind relaying that so far we voted to approve the overhead doors and the vapor barrier. Right now we understand that outside of the roof, overhead doors are number 1, vapor barrier number 2, and we're going to leave those in. And if something has to go, we'll take off vapor barrier first, and then we would leave the overhead doors if we could, but we'd sacrifice those to the greater good of the roof if we had to.
I will do that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we didn't vote the vapor barrier yet. We tabled that.
Oh, right, because we're waiting to see if it's an estimate or
Yeah.
or an actual. Okay. So calendar is set. Hopefully we'll have more recommendations from Wage and Personnel next week. Any other public participation? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:10 p.m.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Please take care. We'll talk soon.
Good night.
You too.
Good night, and thank you.
Night.
Right.
Thank you all.